This is the Jump Around with Jim Rutledge, outfitted by Iron Jock, streaming live on the ESPN Madison YouTube channel.
This is the Jump Around 3.0. Hope everyone is enjoying the holiday season. I am as well, so we are taping this on Monday. It's going to run back on Thursday, so Merry Christmas. If something happens and I sound a little dated in the first part of this, I am sorry. We are brought to you by Iron Jock. Use the promo code ESPN30 for 30% off all purchases of $50 or more at ironjock.com. That's Iron Jock with a C. And I want to talk about today's show first, and then I'll give you a little bit of news. So today's show, if you are tuning in live or if you're looking to watch back on ESPN Madison's YouTube page, it's going to be a best of the Jump Around guest. And we're going to talk about lots of different things you're going to hear from the guest, talking about Badgers football, what it means to them, the state of the program under Luke Fickell, recruiting and program development, NIL and transfer era, and then obviously their picks for the greatest running backs in school history. So Joe Thomas, James White, Montee Ball, Barry Alvarez, Joel Stave, Melvin Gordon, Lamar Campbell, and Anthony Davis all join the show in the best of. That'll be coming up in a minute. I do want to touch on the fact that the Badgers lost Mabry Matoyer into the transfer portal on Saturday night. The Badgers currently have 3 QBs on their roster heading into next season. That is Billy Edwards Jr., that is Daniel O'Neal, and that is Carter Smith. The first 2 are quarterbacks who have had some experience starting in college football, and I think the Badgers have some nice depth for the short term, but you do need some quarterbacks to develop over time. Now, Daniel O'Neal's got 3 years left, but Billy Edwards is a 1-year solution. Carter Smith would have 4 years of eligibility. So expect to see another QB land with the Wisconsin Badgers in the portal. Probably looking more on that Daniel O'Neal side of things of a younger QB. Also, I'm excited about this addition here. The other additions they added, I'll start with them first. Grambling State defensive lineman Michael Garner, Michigan punter/kicker Stone Anderson, and Kentucky outside linebacker Tyrese Fearbry, are all additions to the team. But FCS freshman All-American wide receiver Mark Hamper from Idaho is interesting to me. Lots of schools were coming after him, and I think he has the opportunity to be one of those players that level up. And Wisconsin wasn't the only team in on him. Don't be we always used to knock the idea of don't be a star watcher, like, oh, it's only a 3-star guy. It doesn't matter. This is actually a classic Badger recruit in the idea of like Chris Borland and others 3-star guys that continue to grow as better players. Mark Hamper with Jason Eck at Idaho. Jason Eck got the job, I believe, at New Mexico. And this player, Hamper, wanted to level up. He went to Wisconsin, and he fits the body size, and he was very productive at the FCS level. So I do love the idea of Vinny Anthony. And then obviously you have Trech Kahuna. You have Mark Hamper on this team. Those are 3 guys who have made significant, I would say, statistics, made some noise at the college football level to varying degrees. So those, for me, are going to be the 3 I'm most excited about. But I do want to tell you about Simon Chevy in Mount Horeb. It's been kind of snowy for the first time in a while, and I have my big blue truck from Simon Chevy in Mount Horeb. You can get one. You're only minutes away from a better buying experience. For the Badgers football team, I'm cautiously optimistic, and I think this is a team that is, if you get caught up in what they lost, you might get freaked out. But I saw this. This is actually sent in by Hunter Vaughn in our ESPN Madison group text, because I'll just share here. Maybe Matoyer, the news came through that he was leaving on Saturday, and Matt Hamilton, my co-host on Jim, Matt, and Molly, said, are we a joke? And he's not someone that's going to follow the ins and outs of all these players. I think he's like most fans. Maybe not the fans that watch this show, but most fans, I think, are only loosely aware. And he knows the name Will Pauling. He knows the name maybe Matoyer, Braden Locke, Tyler Van Dyke. He knows the names of players who have left, so that all of a sudden that feels bad. He's not going to know the names of players coming in. But the Wisconsin Badgers, this was sent in, this is from 24/7, but the Wisconsin Badgers currently ranked 7th in the transfer portal team rankings. And that's basically the commits coming in, and you're kind of adding up their stars, and there's lots of different ways you put this together, but they are right up there as far as portal rankings, as far as players coming in. Xavier Lucas, and I mean this with Respect that. I'm trying to think of anyone else. Probably Will Pauling. Players going to go Power 5 and make an impact in a year or two. Those are probably your two best bets. There's other players who left who maybe end up at Power 5, maybe an impactful player in a few years. But I think those are the two that you might see the most likely to have an impact. I don't think Braden Locke's going to have a major impact at a Power 5 level. TVD, maybe, but he's got the injury. So I don't know if, Ryan, you want to hop in? Are those your guys the most worried about having an impact within the next 2 years?
I would say the most likely to have an impact would be those two guys, though I will say there was a little bit of an update on Saturday night as well. Apparently Xavier Lucas, the Badgers, never actually entered his papers into the portal.
I did see that, yes.
So they might be trying to... very cautious and very unsure of what's going on in that situation. There's a lot of rumors of there being tampering from some other programs down on South Beach, maybe somewhere in Florida, his old stomping grounds.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say any names, but, go Canes. Anyways... I believe that there's a chance something could still happen there, so we might get news between now and Thursday about that. But I agree that him and Will Pauling be the two most significant contributors elsewhere. And then I will also say we have found out that former Badgers outside linebacker Leon Lowry and defensive lineman Kurt Neal both committed to Illinois.
You're right. I forgot about Lowry. Lowry can make an impact there. And not saying Neal couldn't either, but I would say that, and it's not knocking on those players, I think the Badgers are bringing in players who can match the production those players had, hopefully exceed, and hopefully other players that left do well, in their situations too. So we'll keep an eye on Lucas. Again, this was taped on Monday, so this very well could be resolved by the time this happens. Look, if you're looking for anything to do this holiday weekend, go to Ho Chunk Gaming Madison. That's where winners go. What better way to enjoy Christmas and have a happy holidays than to win money at Ho Chunk Gaming Madison? All right, we're going to get to a big run of Badger guests. This will be a compilation of Joe Thomas, James White, Montee Ball, Barry Alvarez, Joel Stave, Melvin Gordon, Lamar Campbell, and Anthony Davis. Thanks to Primetime Wollersheim for his work. We started up in September. The show has been crushing it thanks to him. And thank you. Holiday season got this bug in my throat. Thank you to all of you for watching and listening. This is The Jump Around.
Staying on top of our game is one of the hardest things to do. At Game Day Men's Health, we specialize in testosterone replacement therapy, weight loss, erectile dysfunction, and wellness. Proven to increase energy, build muscle, improve mood, and boost sex drive. Get started now and book your free consultation and testing. You'll get test results back in minutes, and we'll create a plan to optimize your health. Game Day Men's Health. Book your free consultation today.
We are now joined by Hall of Famer Joe Thomas on the Jump Around 3.0. Jim Rutledge, Brad Nortman with you. And Joe, before we get into a lot of Badger talk, and I want to try to make that stuff as positive as possible, you've had an interesting couple months. Can you update everyone where you've been, what you've been up to? And it's good to see you back stateside.
Yeah, it's great to be back in Wisconsin. I was actually living in Germany for the last 9 months. I was over there coaching the Munich Ravens football team. They're in the European League of Football. So there's 17 teams in Europe throughout, mostly Germany, but all the other countries around Germany as well, that play in a pretty cool summer league. You're allowed 4 Americans on each team. And it was a great experience because I brought my whole family over there. My kids were going to school. And it was pro football almost as we know it in the States. And we just had such an amazing experience. But I'm really excited to be back in Madison for the right time of the year, which I just got back home last week, and NFL is going strong, college football going strong, coaching my son's 8-year-old flag football. So football season is in full force, which feels a little different than it did when I was in Europe.
Yeah, Joe, thanks for joining. It's a blast to have you. And, you and I both went to Brookfield Central High School. You probably get a lot of, okay, when you say you went to Brookfield Central, oh, is that Brad Nortman's high school? You probably get that a lot. So apologies for that already. But I want to talk about the Wisconsin Badgers. And when you and I were being recruited, we're Wisconsin guys. And to me, before the NIL era, the Wisconsin Badgers had some legitimate recruiting advantages, right? Whether it be high academics, winning program, the social experience. There's a few programs that can say all of those are top tier, like Wisconsin. But now with the NIL era, I feel like my perspective and just my observation is those don't carry as much weight as they used to. So I just wonder, how can Wisconsin thrive in recruiting in an NIL era when I feel like all the natural advantages to being a great school experience and program don't carry as much weight as they were when you and I were being recruited?
Yeah, I think you're right, because obviously now you're essentially able to pay players. And so the programs that have the richest boosters are going to be the ones that are going to pay the players the most. And unfortunately for the Big Ten, we don't have quite as many wealthy boosters as they do in the SEC or down in Texas and some of those schools. So our natural advantage, because the money was even, because you made the players play for nothing, essentially. So we were able to kind of lean on some of those other things. So I think the key thing for us, because we'll never be able to compete with Texas, Alabama, some of those schools on an NIL paying the players standpoint. But for us, the key is going to be development, right? Because it's great to think that you can just buy all these great players, but you still have to develop them, right? And we know how many times you bring in a guy who's a 5-star recruit and he doesn't turn out. Actually, when I was there, my 4 years, we had just as many guys that were walk-ons or no-star or 1-star recruits that ended up becoming first-round draft picks and All-Americans as there was 5-stars that did nothing for us. And so I think just because you're paying these guys more money, it does hurt you a little bit, because then maybe you can't target exactly the guy that you used to maybe want, or you can't win some of those recruiting battles by selling Wisconsin as a program, as an academic institution with the best social experience as far as partying and having a great time on campus. Where now the money is much bigger of a factor. But I think if you're developing guys and you're selling the fact that, hey, you know what, it's great to get $100,000 in NIL money now, but you know what, in the NFL, have you seen what they're paying these guys these days? Like, you get $30 million a year playing left tackle. And so if you come here, we're going to develop you better than anywhere else, like Wisconsin has done since Barry was here in the early 90s. And you know what? 30 million is more than 100,000. So let's look long-term. And so you got to sell sort of that long-term approach, that this is an investment in yourself as a football player or as a person, right? Because you're going to get a great academic degree if you come to Wisconsin. You're going to make incredible networking opportunities with the alumni. That's one of the biggest alumni networks from coast to coast in the country. So I think you just got to sell the players on the long-term prospects of coming to Wisconsin and try to tell them that, you know, it's a fool's game to go for the short-term advantages in an extra couple $100,000, which is a lot of money. I'm not saying it's not, right. But when you're talking about developing a player and becoming an NFL player that's a first-round pick and maybe gets to their second contract, like, that's an investment in yourself to come to Wisconsin, because we can develop a player into a great football player, a great man with a lifetime of being able to make high salaries.
And I love that approach, and I think you can even use it to pluck players from – I mean, I believe Tack Curtis is an example from USC, who was the first time around interested in Wisconsin, went to USC, maybe didn't get the playing time or didn't fit right. So now he's at Wisconsin. So he kind of saw the light and said, hey, NIL money's here, but also I have the opportunity to come to a school that's developed a lot of linebackers. And I love that. Joe, the other concern, though, would be the Badgers have to start winning/developing these players. Like, that's that other trade-off. You're talking about the program under Paul and Jim. Yes. So that's the other side of it. So how important is these next few years for the Badgers to be able to sell that they can develop pros?
Well, in the NFL, you usually get about 2 years to make a statement, to build a culture, and to turn your program around. College football, maybe 3 or 4 years. Sometimes even a little bit less if you have impatient boosters, if you're at a USC or at Alabama or Texas. But at Wisconsin, you know, it's kind of about a 4-year deal. And for Fickell and his staff, like, winning at the beginning is really important, because it allows you to get better recruits in year 3 and then in year 4. And that was one of the things being around Brett Bielema when he took over as the head coach my senior year that I saw. You know, they put an enormous amount of effort into recruiting the best guys they possibly could, into developing everybody early on. Not saying that you don't do that later on in your career, but I mean, you are so laser focused on getting that thing turned around in the first or second year and building your culture and bringing in the guys that you want to be there, that can run your offense and that you can run your defense. Because it's going to become something that is a self-fulfilling prophecy after you sell that it's a good program, and then now you show that you can develop players and you can be a winning team and you can develop these offensive linemen or linebackers or quarterbacks or whatever you're trying to sell and who you're trying to be in your program, that now the people that you're selling that to the next time are going to believe it because they're seeing the product on the field.
Well, Joe, it's awesome to have you back in Madison. Awesome to have you back on the air. I do want to point out, and I think there's like a Twitter like room raider. Your room that you're doing this was like a COVID thing, but it's still been out there. Where you're broadcasting from is amazing. Before we let you go, like what's your favorite thing behind you? Because there's so many cool things.
Yeah, a lot of cool things. This is a relic from when I was doing Thursday Night Football during COVID, and literally every pregame, halftime, and postgame show I did from my office. And it was a very sad period of my life, like a lot of people, because my whole family was asleep, and I was sitting here yelling into a microphone at 12:30 at night, going over the Thursday Night Football highlights. But I think there's a lot of things that are really special, but I'll go real quick. So I got my Hall of Fame bust here, which is not the actual bust, but it's the replica that they give to all the players. And that yellow blanket, it's not my kid's blanket. It's actually the blanket that went over the bust before we unveiled it at my Hall of Fame. And then that guitar right there at Cleveland Browns home games, one of the things that they started last year, or I can't remember exactly. I think it was last year. After going to Germany, like my years really got messed up because living abroad for 9 months really screwed me up. But the tradition they have is they bring somebody out a lot of times, like celebrity or a former player or something. And right before kickoff, you go up on stage and you smash a guitar because, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and Cleveland Mat Association. So that was cool. So I got to be the first person to do that, or maybe I was the second person to do that. But kind of cool. They gave me the guitar that I got to smash and pretend to be a rock star for a day.
That is awesome, Joe. Thank you so much for hopping on and talking Badgers with us.
Thanks, Joe.
Anytime, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Talking with James White, and I believe you're in the NIU, I don't know if it's a training room or whatever, and we had Coach Hammock on. Love it. And we had Coach Hammock on after the victory over Notre Dame. And Coach Hammock is a guy that, once a Badger, always a Badger. So it was great to see the success that he's having. And obviously you're around that program some. And what do you kind of see from a guy like Coach Hammock in some of those Badger traits that carry, whether it's in your life, but also in Coach Hammock's life, that they picked up at the University of Wisconsin that you hope is continuing here at Madison, even though you're gone?
Just being tough, smart, dependable, and just guys that work hard. Doesn't matter how much talent you have and all that. If you work hard, play together as a team, I think that was our strength when we were there at Wisconsin. We didn't necessarily have all 4 or 5 star recruits. The buy-in was there, the work ethic was there, and I feel like that's what was our advantage on game day. We played to it. We played to our toughness. We played to, not making mistakes and giving ourselves the best opportunity to win football games. So I think those traits still will carry forward. I think it's just all about bringing the right guys into the program, and I think that's what it's all about.
And I just want to jump in front of Brett because I want to follow up on that one as far as the right guys in the program. And obviously, it's hard because it's a totally different era than when you were being recruited. And I know Brad's talked a lot about you want to find these hungry players, and I think you were one of them. Even though I definitely saw you. I was going to FAU when you were down at St. Thomas Aquinas. So I remember talking to Des about those powerhouse schools down there, and football down in Florida is different. But I think Zach Brown was a running back from that area too. They came up here. There was a lot of good players from South Florida that made their way up. But nowadays, it is really tough. And I know you touched on as far as the dollars, but keeping players, developing players, it is a completely different era. So I guess my question is how much, when you're trying to adjust the identity of a program, and we'll have to see if this was the right choice. I hope it was. And I think Coach Fickell, to make this move, is the right guy. He just has to have the time because he's been successful. But changing a program in Cincinnati in that conference is like maybe moving like a big, like a yacht. But moving this program is like moving a giant military, shipping boat, so it is a lot to do. And if it's moved the right way and getting in the right direction, it can get there. But when you talk about how different recruiting is now and how difficult it is to keep players here, which I think is part of the reason why they switched to the air raid to make it a little bit more appealing of an offensive style, how much leeway do you account for trying to change the identity of a program in a completely Wild West recruiting program or system right now?
Yeah, for me, I've got to meet Luke Fickell, quite a few times. I think he is the right guy for the job. I think he has the buy-in. I think he understands, the nature of, athletes these days and, what they need, what you need to cater to. Obviously, he's had success, being an assistant coach at Ohio State, being a head coach at Cincinnati, turning that program over. I think for me, next year will be the biggest year that's really telling. Your year 3, starting to get like your own recruiting classes in there. Hopefully, I just think the main principle for the program will still just have to be developmental. Like we can't always just rely on the transfer portal. We do need to get guys from there, but I think the basis of it has to be, getting freshmen, developing the guys. Maybe not always the guys that are playing right away. Maybe it takes some guys 2 or 3 years before they get out there, but when they are, ready to step on the field, they've learned enough, they've practiced hard enough, and they're prepared for their time to step in as starter. So as much as you can, which is hard to retain players these days, especially if they're talented. You have all these different schools calling and, trying to figure out if they can poach them from you. Right. But as much as you can, try and develop these players, I think that's the most important thing.
James, before we let you go here, I'll ask this on a positive note. The moment that sticks out the most to you, and it could be big or small, it could be on the field, off the field, at Madison, that kind of just encompasses your time here and kind of defines what it meant to be a Badger while you were playing for the team. And that's a tough one.
Yeah, that's a tough question. I had a lot of great moments there. To pick one, it's hard. I mean, I'll say 2 of them. My freshman year, obviously beating Ohio State. There being the underdogs. Obviously, we started off the game the right way. Just the complete team football win. David Gilreath started off with a kickoff return. Defense played well. Offense played well. Just a complete team win. That just kind of sparked this. I thought that was a great program victory and allowed us to sustain success throughout my entire time being there. And the other one, I'd probably say my junior year when we beat Nebraska. We ran all over them in the Big Ten championship. I think that was just a culmination too as well, just because they beat us early in the year, got another opportunity, playing them in the Big Ten championship. No, I don't think we were necessarily the greatest, football team that year, but we stuck together throughout the entire year, got our rematch, played extremely well that game, executed the game plan. Nebraska made their plays early on in the football game, but we just kept our foot on the gas. Melvin, Montee, myself, offensive line, the defense. That was just an extremely fun victory. And I said it was just a great team win. I thought that was what Wisconsin football is all about. I said just that toughness and just executing at a high level.
James, one more quick one before you go. So obviously Wisconsin, man, it's running back you, right? So many running backs before and after you have just allowed that nickname to flourish. And it is true. I mean, the countless success collegially in NFL, Wisconsin is running back you. But I also had some rushes, right? I had a 17-yard run against Iowa and an 11-yard run in the Rose Bowl. What do you say? Can I be part of the running backs? Can I be considered part of running back you? Would that be okay with you?
That's okay with me. Look, being a punter, putting your body on the line in those situations, making sure you get the catch, getting the right run reads. I can put you in there. I do remember those plays vividly, especially the Iowa one. I will say that game stood out to me as well too. Going on the road, I remember when we got the ball on our final possession, how loud it was in Iowa. It was rocking there. Heck of a performance by offensive line, defense, and Montee. Montee stepped in. Yeah. I know I went down that game. Sure. Montee stepped in after not playing for a couple games and made a huge run and had a heck of a game for us. So I said, I just think that just goes to show what Wisconsin football is all about. When your number's called, being ready, being prepared for the moment, no matter who it is.
All right, you heard it there. I'm a running back.
No, I love it. Now, you can conclude Brad into this, but it got me thinking. And if you don't want to answer, that's fine. But excluding yourself, who do you think is the greatest Badger running back of all time?
That's tough. I'm going to go Melvin Gordon. I'm going to go with my guy. He just has the speed, the power, everything you need. And at the time, after I left, especially his senior year, he was heavily relied upon, that entire, season, team stacking box, doing everything they can to slow him down. But still him ripping off 150-yard games, 200-yard games, couple touchdowns. It was truly impressive to see the growth from him. His freshman year, not playing too much, and then all the way to that point where he was the guy being up for the Heisman and all that, and consistently performing. I thought that was impressive. And look, they made it to the Big Ten championship too, so not like they were just a slouch football team, and a big part of that was because of him.
Look, you're preaching to the choir. Every once in a while, you look back at it. As a sophomore, and I know there was only 62 carries, but 10 yards per carry, James, as a sophomore for Melvin. And then as a bell cow with 206 carries as a sophomore. So as a redshirt freshman, he did that. And as a sophomore, he had 7.8 yards per carry with 12 touchdowns. But you talk about that last year, just to put – because I do think he's just forgotten because, he came in, I think, second in the Heisman. He was right there. But 2,587 rushing yards in 2014, 7.5 yards per carry, 29 touchdowns, and oh, by the way, also had nearly 200 yards receiving and ended up having 32 total touchdowns as a guy who was kind of the entire offense there. So I'm not going to fight you. I'm not going to fight you on Melvin. Yeah, absolutely. He's underappreciated with how great he was.
He definitely was, man. He had some huge games, all throughout that entire year. My favorite game was honestly his last game against Auburn. Like the way he handled himself in that one against the SEC team when they were talking crap before the game about they don't play anybody, this and that, and to rip off that performance. That I always tell him that fourth down run he had, that touchdown. I said that's my favorite run of his entire career. Just a fun one to watch. I said the growth and development of him.
And now you made me a little bit sad because nowadays, and I think maybe Melvin would play, but nowadays he'd be told not to play, and they wouldn't play in that bowl game.
Yeah.
Because it's not a playoff game.
You would never see that type of performance.
You won't see that. So this is just three old guys reminiscing about the good old days when everyone tried extra hard and they had to run uphill both ways. So, James, thank you so much for jumping on the jump around.
Thanks, James.
No problem. Appreciate you guys having me.
Montee Ball, future college football Hall of Famer on the show, Badger Hall of Famer. And Montee asked the question of Melvin Gordon, asked the question of James White. You have to remove yourself off of this list because otherwise you have a strong case to be at the top of it. I know you shared this on social, but share it with us here on the jump around. Who are your top 5 running backs? Give the list first, and then we'll walk through the reasoning for it. Montee, if you're going to put yourself on the list, you got to put yourself higher. But anyways, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. Right. I love the exercise because I love the fact that you're asking Melvin Gordon, you're asking James, right? Some guys that are absolutely phenomenal, were phenomenal for the Badgers, right? We can't put ourselves on the list or put ourselves high on the list. So the list I shared was Melvin Gordon number 1, Ron Dayne number 2, JT number 3, myself number 4, and I can't remember what I tweeted out for number 5. Oh, obviously AD. Yes. I'm going to stick with that. AD for number 5. And I'm very comfortable with that list. I know it's I'm going against the grain, right? Of not having Ron Dayne as number 1. He does have the hardware. He does have the stats. I understand all of that. But when we talk about what Melvin Gordon was able to do with, I think upwards to 630. Let me check my stats, Jim. Upwards to 631 fewer carries than Ron. Mm-hmm. And he had to share a backfield with a future Hall of Fame, college football Hall of Fame. So I'm impressed. I'm very impressed by Melvin Gordon, what he was able to do, honestly. We're talking, it's impressive.
It's the yards per carry that I think it does sneak by a lot of people when he he came in second at the Heisman, and you know about going to the Heisman ceremony as well, but to rush for 2,587 yards at 7.5 yards per carry, his career average of yards per carry is 7.8, is insane. It is absolutely insane. Yours is remarkable at 5.6, and obviously your Heisman caliber season where you had multiple Heisman, but your record-setting season, 1,900 yards, 6 yards per carry, 33 touchdowns on the ground, and then obviously you had 39 total touchdowns, and that was a pretty impressive season as well. That's the 2011 season. Now, I did joke.
Keep going, Jim. Keep going, Jim. Keep
Well,
going.
so Melvin did hint that him and James felt like when they got the ball that year, they had to take it in from further out because if it got in the red zone and got close, Brett was really hyper aware of getting you your touchdowns. Now, obviously, you still had to get in the end zone, but I think those touchdowns did come at the cost of some of your teammates sometimes.
Absolutely. I tend to, and this is something that that's why I'm super close with those guys still. We all have a humble bone, a lot of them in our bodies, right? I mean, let's be real, right? Ron Dane, of course, impact player, greatest. I mean, phenomenal. We don't even have to talk about that. Yeah. He knows that. Melvin, same. James, same. Myself, same. Obviously, JT, Braylon. These guys have done all great things. But for me, honestly, with what you just said, what are we talking about here, right? If we're not putting him at number one, again, no disrespect to Ron, but Melvin should have won the Heisman. We all know that. 2,500 rushing yards, no offensive line. 29 rushing touchdowns, if I'm getting that correctly, right? 7.8 yards per carry. Come on.
He had 32 total touchdowns. He only came 7 short of your number.
Come on. And he didn't have, the linemen that I had. Again, if I had to redo this list and put myself at the top, I put myself at the top. But let's be honest here. 4 out of my 5 offensive linemen were the highest paid in the NFL once they went on. So if Melvin had those linemen, come on. What are we talking about, Jim? What are we talking about here?
And I do. I mean, you obviously were the bell cow for. I would say it's hard to give it to a team that didn't win the Rose Bowl, but unquestionably the most electric and explosive Badger team I think ever, and a team that came really close to being a national championship contender, and really close to winning that Rose Bowl. So you being the bell cow of that is truly a remarkable feat for you on that team. But you are right. Melvin coming in second there. It is funny. And, Montee and Ryan, you can chime in on this. It is one vote difference, one spot difference in that Heisman. He gets the Heisman, and Melvin is unquestionably, and nobody's even looking side-eye at you if you say he's the best Badger running back of all time.
It's a real shame.
Thank you.
Yes.
And I say that, and I appreciate you saying that, Jim, because I'm not just saying this because I know the guy very well. I mean, if you want to really keep the integrity of the sport, that position, obviously, being more specific, look at what he did. And the Heisman is all about opinions, right? My season in 2011, I didn't even win the award that goes to the best running back in the country.
Right.
None of that stuff matters. It doesn't. Yeah, the Heisman is the Heisman. I understand that. But my point is, Melvin, we all know, should have won the Heisman over top of what, Mariota, I believe it was?
Yep.
He most definitely should have won it. And if he did have the hardware, what are we talking about then?
You're right. And you did get a Doak Walker. You did end up with that award, and so did Melvin during their time. And it is one of those things where, and I hate, because we just did an event with Ron, and Ron told a lot of stories about how he's pulled, and we saw Melvin pulled in the fourth quarter, and you were pulled in games. Like, there are stats that could have been accumulated that could have been even higher, and Ron definitely could have had even more yards. It's almost like you almost could do the little bit of, obviously it's just the easiest comp, but like the LeBron and the Jordan thing of Jordan at his peak, like Melvin at his peak in the singular season and seasons that he had, better than Ron, but Ron's career and being able to do all of that and accumulate all those yards with not a lot of everyone knew the ball was going to Ron. I mean, there was no. Sure. I mean, I don't know if I'm 100% right on this, but I swear they were talking about a game where they only threw the ball 3 times in the entire game. And so, I mean, there was definitely games where they threw the ball less than 10 times. There was no secrets. I mean, they might as well just. I mean, and Ron was so green, Montee, that when he got here, he's told the story before, his fullback, Cecil Martin, had to tap his hip to tell Ron which side to run to. So they would get up to the line, and then Ron would be behind him, and he would just tap his hip, and that's where Ron knew where to go. Because Ron had just gotten here, he wasn't supposed to play this early, and then they needed him to play. And, I mean, he put up some crazy numbers as well. So we got to give Ron, we give you your flowers. Absolutely. We'll give Melvin his flowers.
Absolutely.
We'll give Ron his flowers as well. But it really is almost like the longevity of a career as opposed to the peak of a career.
I agree. And that's why this is always a tough conversation because, again, all these guys I love to death. I think these are wonderful human beings, obviously amazing football players. But if you honestly had to ask me, without putting myself at the top, that is my list. Now, a different list, I'm putting myself. Oh boy, I can't contradict myself here. I gotta keep the integrity, right?
Yeah.
I gotta go third. I gotta go third.
Okay.
I gotta go third. Melvin and Ron, still with the impact they had, the stats they put up. Yes.
If we did the NBA comp though, Montee, that makes you what, Kobe? It's Jordan, LeBron, and Kobe. Like if you wanted, you know what I mean. So however you want to look at it, that's just the way you can break that down for yourself. So sometimes you go to the school that I would say 98% of the schools you're unquestionably the greatest running back of all time, but that's part of the reason you go to RBU because you want to create a legacy, which means you might be a college football Hall of Famer and be viewed as the third best running back in school's history.
That speaks volumes about where RBU is. It's not Georgia. It's not Bama. It's Wisconsin. Because exactly what you said right there. Right?
I wanted to pick your brain on, and I asked Melvin about this too, is Ashton Genty. And his running style too, the way he stands, and there's been a lot of internet memes about it. And Ryan's got it up there where he looks like Michael Myers is the one that I've seen. He looks completely disinterested. And Montee, I'll ask you what Thomas Hammock would tell you if you stood like that in the backfield, and then talk about trying to run with that sort of stance out of the backfield. Now he's a smaller back. He is 5'8" or 5'9". So. And it's 215, it's not like it's more of a Barry Sanders build for him.
Of course, absolutely. Extremely impressed with that guy. Extremely impressed. Obviously, we see folks, the non-sayers online saying, well, if he's not playing anybody, well, he put up 200 yards against Oregon, right? Mm-hmm. And Oregon's ranked, second or fourth or whatever they are now in the country, right? And so he's a very impressive running back now.
He's averaging 10 yards per carry. Like, I don't care who you're playing. He's averaging 10 yards per carry.
Consistent. It's consistent.
1,248 yards rushing and 17 touchdowns. We are halfway through the season, Montee. Yeah, so.
It's ridiculous. It's disgusting numbers. Very impressed with him. Now, with that stance, Thomas Hammock would be absolutely disgusted in me. Because, for one, he would ask me, well, what is the benefit of that stance? Now, I believe that Ashton's Genty, right? Genty's, the purpose of it is you're sacrificing immediate explosion out of your stance for recovery of the legs, right? Less fatigueness of the legs. So standing straight up, you're not in a bent knee position. You're not flexing your quads. You're not flexing your thighs. And he's going to get 2,000 carries this season. So, he's got to make sure that his legs are safe, but very impressed with that young man. I know it's between him and Hunter for the hardware. I love Ashton. Got to give it to the running back if he continues. Absolutely impressive numbers.
The jump around continues on ESPN Madison's YouTube page. We're going to be joined by Barry Alvarez in a minute. I've heard plenty of stories about Coach Alvarez from my longtime co-hosts Tarek Saleh and Derek Engler, and I am upset a little bit with them. And I've talked about it before, and we're going to play this clip because I think this is Derek Engler there with Coach Alvarez, and I understand that Derek played for Coach Alvarez, but I've known Derek for a good 15 years. He could have given me a little bit of hey, maybe Rutledge didn't really mean that, or maybe Alex G's taking Rutledge out of context. But let's play Coach Alvarez on the Great Dane Huddle.
This is utterly preposterous that I've even heard that. For to hear someone even have mentioned that is so ridiculous. I wouldn't even give it credibility to answer that. So you can tell Rutledge that is absolutely ridiculous.
Amen. All right. There is Derek Engler. You heard him in the background, but now we are thrilled to be joined by Coach Barry Alvarez on the jump around. Coach, thanks for making the time this afternoon.
Absolutely. Good to be with you.
Yes, we're thrilled to have you on here, and I want to start with the show that I used to host for a long time with Tarek Saleh and Derek Engler, and they speak very highly of you. So I wanted to ask you, because I do think that they fight for your attention like children would, and I want to know which one's your favorite. Which one is your favorite? Right now, tell us which one is your favorite, Tarek or Derek?
Do you have children?
I have 2 daughters.
Which one's your favorite?
I love them the same. So, yes.
Well, I have 8 grandkids and 3 children, and I love them all the same, too. And those guys are just like my kids.
They absolutely are, and I've known them for 15 years, so they've been great to host with you. But I got a text from Lamar Soup Campbell, and he wanted me to ask you. When I told him I was talking to you today, he wanted to know if Marked for Death is still your favorite Steven Seagal movie.
Marked for Death.
Yeah, he texted me immediately.
Seagal was my guy.
Yeah,
that's what I used to take. Anytime he had a movie out, I'd take the players to see a Seagal movie.
So that must have stuck with him. Yeah, that must have stuck with him because he said, ask Coach Alvarez about the movie Marked for Death that came out in 1990. A retired DEA agent, Steven Seagal, has to hunt down a Jamaican drug posse and that has targeted him and his family for movie. And let's be honest, Seagal's fantastic, but every movie's the same too. So
it is. He got them all. That's why I don't remember the name of it or any other movie. but I used to take my players to him. I put them in the right mindset the night before a game.
I think one of the things that fans are also used to is, and I understand the offense has changed, but running backs. And, we've been talking a lot to different, we have Melvin Gordon, James White, Montee Ball, all on. And I want to ask you this. We're going to set aside because, one, I want to ask you this question that Ron Dayne's going to be your vote for the greatest Badger running back of all time. Tell us what made Ron so great? Because it's surprising, but with each passing year, Ron Dayne seems more and more of a memory, but Ron Dayne helped change the complexion of Badger football and change the fortunes of it. And I think the greatest college running back of all time. So remind fans what made Ron so great.
Well, first of all, Ron was a freak of nature. He's probably 5'10". He came in as I think when he showed up, he was, I believe, 275, 280 pounds that summer. He had just come from a national discus and shot put. He was the champion of one and runner-up for the other. Broke national records and could throw it further than anybody in the country. That showed you the explosiveness and the athleticism that he had. And I'll never forget that first day. John Detman, our strength coach, came up and our players worked out. I remember running 10-yard bursts. I think Ronnie weighed in, I think it was at 280 then. He had just come from that shot from the track championships. And he's winning the bursts. And Detman coming in and saying, man, we got somebody special here. But he was someone that everybody recruited him as a fullback because of his body, because of his size. He was short and stocky, very powerful, but he could really run. He was very fast, had good vision. He could cut. And he said, Coach, I want to run the ball. I said, oh, Ron, that ball's not very heavy. I'm going to give it to you as much as you want. And we went to stretch it. I remind people this. He was our offense when he was an 18-year-old freshman.
Yeah.
He went to stretch it. You go back and check it. I think it was 50 carries, 49 carries, 52 carries in a 3-game stretch.
Yeah.
He'd put his hand on his helmet, want to come out for a blow, and I'd say, I'll get me one more first down. Then you can take a blow.
So with that, I want to ask a question like this. During your time as whether coaching a team or as athletic director or even watching it, who's the back that has had the closest sort of impact or closest sort of back to Ron? Not even running style, just that sort of workhorse, carry the team running back. Who's the guy you saw the most like Ron?
Yeah, I thought Melvin was special. Yeah, Melvin he could run with power. You saw him run through people. You saw him run with speed. You see him make cuts. And out in the open field, there was no one prettier than him, striding out. And I remember I was the head coach that one year, his senior year at the bowl game. And he came up, he was upset. And I didn't understand. We were playing Georgia. I said, what's the problem? Or no, Auburn.
Yeah.
I think it was Auburn. He says, that running back from Auburn just got on me and said, hell, anybody can have the numbers you have. If you're running against some of those teams in the Big Ten, they're not very good. Try to do that in the Southeast Conference. And I said, oh, don't worry, Ron. Melvin. Yeah. I'm going to give you that rock, man. I'm going to lather you up in this game. You're going to be able to show him up good, which he did.
Well, and Melvin, I believe, I know I've talked to him plenty of times, but I believe he said on this show that was his favorite game as a Badger. Just being able to go out and win one for you and carry the ball and kind of remind everyone that the Big Ten can go compete in the SEC. That was one of his favorite games, if not his favorite game as a Badger.
Well, that's nice to hear. It just reinforcing what he said right after the game or before the game. But that was great. He played super.
And I want to get back to the Badger program, but you mentioned about finding the rhythm and having some great running backs. Last Friday, and then Melvin Gordon was honored at the Oregon game, 10-year anniversary of rushing for 408 yards in 3 quarters against Nebraska. Hard to find a rhythm in that game. You were 7 of 11 for 46 yards and a touchdown, but you didn't have to do anything except for hand it off to Melvin. So what are your memories of that game and the performance that Melvin put on in that Nebraska game? Because that had to be fun just to take in.
Yeah, that was an unbelievable game. I know I had one important throw that game. When we were down 17-3, we had a 3rd and long that we converted to Jordan Frederick on the right side, right in front of our bench. And that was about it. That was about it for my day. Besides that, turned around and handed it to Melvin. I remember shortly after that, he had one of the most amazing runs I've ever seen where, like, without breaking stride, he hurdled a guy right in front of our sidelines, went and scored. And from there, it was unbelievable. It was like almost like Nebraska knew what we were calling and lined up in the perfect defense to let us have success. It was fun to be a part of.
It almost was like a movie. I was in the press box for that game, and I think he, tapped the record going into the end zone, student section. The jump around is coming up. There's snow coming down. I mean, honestly, I was turning to people. I'm like, is this real? I mean, did you guys at some point realize that like a record was happening during that game?
To be honest, I didn't. I knew he was having an amazing game, but that season, that was our 11th game of the year. And it felt like every game he ran for, 190 to 250 yards. So it kind of felt like another one of those games. Mm-hmm. Up on the scoreboard at the time, it would show the stats, and it wasn't really until I looked up midway through the 3rd quarter, and it's like, holy smokes, he's got like 350 yards.
Right, yeah.
That you realize that something special was happening. But yeah, everything about that night, the environment was unbelievable. You had, like you said, the snow falling. It was really an important game for us in the conference and on the for the Big Ten West to be able to put ourselves in position to go to the Big Ten championship game. And it was just, it all kind of culminated at the jump around point where Melvin had just broke the record. The snow was falling. Everybody was excited. It was really a high point in my career.
And, actually Melvin was saying that, and Coach Alvarez we had on last week, and they both talked about that bowl game, the Outback Bowl, that you guys won with a game-winning kick, 34-31. A lot of pride on the line at that point against the SEC. That was Melvin's favorite game. It was one of Barry's favorite games to coach. What were your memories? Because you got to go out on a win there. I mean, that's a heck of a way to go out. You got the win. You got the win against an SEC school. Really an impressive way to end an impressive career.
Yeah, it was. That was a cool one to see. I remember some of the noise going into that week was, Melvin Gordon can do it against the Big Ten, but he can't run against the SEC. Yeah. And he went out for, 250, 260 yards, whatever it was.
251 and 3 touchdowns.
He was, it really was a shame that he didn't win the Heisman that year. I think without a doubt he was the best player in the country. He was the most impactful player in the country, and he had the most historic season. Mariota won it that year, and no discredit to him. But it felt like every year there's a quarterback throwing for 4,000 yards and 40 touchdowns, and there's not a running back going for 2,000 plus yards and impacting the game that he was impacting the game on a week in and week out basis, like Melvin was that year. So it was a shame to not see him win the Heisman, but that was an awesome way to send him out, to send Barry out, and a lot of the guys who made that possible, Rob Havenstein and Kyle Costigan, some of these senior offensive linemen who really cleared the way for him to run the way he did that season.
Yeah, 2,587 yards, 29 touchdowns on the ground, 32 overall. The part that blows my mind, Joel, with that, and you're right. I mean, if Melvin wins the Heisman, I think, and Ron Dayne is amazing. I think there's no question that people are putting Melvin Gordon in the Ron Dayne category of like greatest running back of all time at Wisconsin, right there with Ron. And I think people still do, but that Heisman is something that would have done it. But he averaged 7.5 yards per carry that season, Joel. And that actually was below his career average of 7.8 yards per carry. I mean, for a running back in a Power 5 conference that averaged nearly 8 yards per carry is something that I think is just too easily forgotten.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, he wasn't just your everyday feed him the ball 35 times a game and he pounds away for 100+ yards. Like, as a freshman, we were giving him jet sweeps, and he was taking those to the end zone. But even that year, like, everyone was keying on, okay, how do you stop the Badgers? You stop Melvin Gordon, and nobody could do it. And I think that's a credit not only to him but to everyone on the offense, the wide receivers making blocks downfield, the tight ends, the fullback, the offensive line, everybody doing their job. But when everybody knows that you're going to feed this guy the ball and he can still average 7.5 yards per carry and 7.8 over the course of his career, that's a pretty incredible stat. I didn't realize it was that much, so that's cool.
I wanted to ask, we're talking with Melvin Gordon, and I wanted to ask you about the star running back in college football right now, Ashton Jeanty, with 1,000 yards. He is special to watch. It does, at the same time, you talk about the running backs you've talked about it forever, that I honestly feel like hopefully they don't run him into the ground in college because he's only going to get one good contract in the pros, and he's got to be able to be that guy. But I want your thoughts on that and the running back situation from college into the pros. But also, there's been a lot made on social media of his stance in the backfield. They said he stands like Michael Myers in Halloween, and that he gets that ball, that shotgun, and goes. So I want your thoughts on him.
Oh man, he's phenomenal. I mean, I was watching him and I was seeing all these yards and I'm like, oh, okay, he's going to Boise. Who do they play, right? And I was just like, he's probably just running. And then I watched his film and I was like, oh, okay, this guy is he's breaking tackles, like he's earning his keep, like he's earning those yards. It's not like it's just wide open holes. He's making things happen, and it's dope to see, man. And I just hope he can put the backs back on the map. He's so explosive in his own way, and hopefully he goes to a system that fits him and let him be who he is, and instead of going someone just kind of being desperate and just not really fitting the system, because then he really won't get rewarded. But he's doing a phenomenal job. I mean, the Michael Myers thing was hilarious. I seen that. I thought Todd and Le'Veon and those boys kind of stood up kind of high, and Nick Chubbs. Yeah. And this dude, like, pretty much just standing up, like, just chilling. Like, so it's different, man. This guy is explosive. I hope he continue to keep getting the notoriety. I hope he passes Barry Sanders' record because I'm second in it and nobody remembers. I'm second in rushing and nobody remembers. Like, I had a crazy season just like him, and it kind of just got looked over. And he can never get looked over if he gets that record in the Heisman. So hopefully they don't short him like they did me, and I'm rooting for him. I know my man in Colorado is definitely spazzing, but it's time for a back to kind of take that bull by the horns again. And
that was that Mariota that you came in second to? Was that your Heisman year? You're talking about your 2005. Yeah, man.
I almost cried. It was slow motion for me in there. It was tough.
I don't blame you. I mean, I want to give these numbers. We gave them last week, but there's a reason why James gave you the nomination there. 2,587 yards rushing, 7.5 yards per carry is the part that always blows my mind. 29 touchdowns, 32 overall touchdowns, but 29 on the ground. You almost averaged. If you tried a little bit harder, Melvin. No, if you almost averaged 8 yards per carry at Wisconsin, 8 yards per carry in college football power conference play.
Crazy, right? And people talk about crazy seasons and never bring that one up, and I just be like, what more could I have done? It is what it is.
Well, you kind of continue the tradition of getting Ron Dayne, because Ron Dayne is not the all-time leader in rushing yards because something weird with like they count some of his bowl stats, but not other bowl stats because of when the bowl game fell. And then you were pulled, I believe, right at the start of the fourth quarter against Nebraska. You should have had the single game record, and then and then Oklahoma just runs up the score and gets you passed. So you got rondained as well, where other people decided to run up the score. Wasn't you could have had another. With all due respect, actually, there's no respect to Nebraska. You might have had another 60, 70 yards against Nebraska in that game.
Oh, yeah. Easily, man. And it just sucks. And like my college career, it was just I kind of fell short of a lot of things. Big Ten championship, the second in rushing, what you just said with Monty had what? How many touchdowns? 30 what? He had 38.
Yeah, he was up there in touchtowns. You had 32 though. You were getting again. But the same thing could have been said for Ron. Like he was pulled a lot, especially when he was younger, pulled in games. Started the fourth quarter. Like, hey, let's not run him out. Like we're not chasing all time records. You could have hit whether it was that last season if you weren't pulled in games or given the opportunity for those touchdowns. And one thing I'll say for Brett. That I don't know for sure if Gary did this, but Brett definitely was hunting stats. So he kind of knew, let's get Montee this touchdown. There was certain times where it's like anyone can get it. Let's just have Montee get it. And so that was a nice little thing that the Badgers did when Montee was here as well, which is smart because then you get that record you get to hold on to.
Oh, trust me. If anybody knew that, it was me and James. Me and James was like, hey, that's why we wanted to take it 50, 60 yards. We was like, we know if we get in this red zone, we are getting out the game. We knew.
and you know what? Russell probably hurt from it too because they almost negated each other for that Heisman. Because Russ and Montee are putting up those big numbers that, how could you have which one of those guys could only get the big time numbers? And it went to Montee. But yeah, that team was, again, I guess it's one of those. It's not short of it was spectacular, but it could have been all time great one of those seasons. It was.
It really could have. I mean, they had the formula to what we needed for our program with Russell.
Yep.
It's go get that style of quarterback. It worked for us. You know.
It did. Let's put it on a positive. What at Wisconsin? You had a ton of moments, but what was your favorite moment as a Badger?
My favorite moment was winning the bowl game. I'm not gonna lie to you. My last year,
the Auburn one.
The Auburn one, man.
Yeah.
Just because the first 3 years we lost I think we lost a Rose Bowl. We lost 2 Rose Bowls. I want to say we lost James' senior year, and that really hurt me too. James was that was just my big homie,
Mm-hmm.
and James that went out and, he kind of held it together, but I was just a little salty because I was I wanted to win this for him, That's just the pride and just how much I wanted it bad for him. And I just remember, I tell people, I remember being in my room that night just kind of tearing up, knowing it was my last game as a Badger. And I was just man, I gotta do this for the seniors. I cannot have my last game remembered as a loss. Yeah. And I was super sick. I felt like I had the flu, and people thought I wasn't gonna play. They thought I was just sitting out. I'm nah, I'm playing this damn game. I'm just sick as hell right now, and I'm just trying to figure it out. But that game, I was crying, I was tearing up. We lost our coach. That year when I went to the Heisman thing, we lost. I had no one out there with me supporting me because we were going through the whole coaching staff, and it was just, everything leading up to that was just so tough. And Barry coming out and him doing that not once but twice for us, and I always respect him for that. And us winning that game, and it just was the icing on the top for me, man. The cherry on the top of the cake.
And you talk about a running game, and Joe Stave is the winningest quarterback in Badger history, but he went 14-27 in that game for 121 yards, 1 touchdown, 3 picks. But the Badgers scored 34 points. 1 in overtime, 34-31, 34 carries, 251 yards, 3 touchdowns. Obviously, and Corey had a heck of a game as well, but you obviously were the bell cow. Yeah, you couldn't carry all 400 of team rushing yards. You had 251 of them. So yes, your friend Kenzel Doe had a couple big. He had 2 carries for 39 yards. So a couple guys stepped up in that game.
We needed it. We needed every down because it was some games where I was preferably Iowa, where probably was because a couple times. And my homeboy is a Sojourner. I remember walking up to me and being like, Mel, we need you one more play. And I was like, bro, my body is I got you, but I am done for right now, So it's some good times, and I could talk ball all day with the Badgers.
Yeah, and then Rafael Gaglione with the game winner. So
yes, sir.
that guy was
see him too. That's my guy.
he was a fan favorite. What was the trophy game that mattered the most to you?
Oh, the Axe.
Axe, okay.
It was. Oh yeah, I didn't play any type of games when it was Axe week. I was locked in. I refused to lose that Axe. I mean, from day one when I stepped in there, it was like the older guys was like, yeah, I don't care what you do, but if you lose this Axe, like, you probably be off the team because like that's how much like it means to us. Like,
yep.
I mean, I remember I almost got kicked out a couple games. Coach. I mean, it was just. I don't know if you remember or they showed it, but one of the games after when we played in Minnesota, I think it was James' senior year, and then they lined up. We beat them, and they lined up in front of the goalpost, and we were all about to go at it.
Yes.
So it was
because they didn't want you to chop it, right? Yeah, I do remember that.
They did. Yeah. So that's why I think they came up with the new rule that they already bring it over there. I think that happened because of us. That's how much it meant to us.
We are now joined by Lamar Soup Campbell, former Badger player, former Badger staff member, has been with the Chicago Bears, and now with the Seattle Seahawks. Soup, great to see you. You were part of the show the first time around with the jump around.
Good to see you, JR. Happy to be back on, my guy. Yeah, man, you guys opened up the door for me and let an old retired guy come hang out with you guys for a little bit. But proud of the way you guys have grown the show. Obviously, you guys are doing a great job up there in Madison, man. I love to see you guys, bringing Barry back in, bringing the former players back in, and doing a great job of giving the Madison sports fans what they want to hear.
Before we get to your thoughts on the Badger football program, what are you up to now with Seattle? You've been out there for a couple of years. Kind of explain your situation, what you're doing with Seattle, and then you can talk about what you did with Wisconsin when you were here as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So my title here is Strategic Personnel Development. So what I do is I work on the scouting department, and what we do as we're scouting our players throughout the year. My area is the Pacific Northwest, so I have all the schools here. But as we continue to compile all of our information, my job is to take myself and my assistant general manager, we sit down and we do a strategic development on how these guys will not only fit in our system, but how we develop them. In the world of football, you have to win right now, so you want to hit on your draft picks. And you want to make sure you put them in a proper position, not only to grow as men, but as to grow as players on the field, to make sure we're taking advantage of our return on investment when we draft these guys.
And then with the Badgers, what were you doing when you were here as part of the staff?
Yeah, I was assistant AD of engagement while I was there in Wisconsin, worked very closely with the football staff, but all student athletes. So I was all over, spent a lot of time, believe it or not, over with the rowing team, the basketball team, women's soccer, women's volleyball. So I was pretty much, assistant AD of engagement for all sports. I really had a good insight. I think that was maybe one of my favorite times in my career, to be involved with so many different student athletes from so many different backgrounds. And I can only hope they learn from me as much as I learned from them during my time in Madison.
Every player that I've talked to that's been around you speaks very highly of you. I did want to ask, do you ever talk about your time in Wisconsin with John Schneider? Obviously a Green Bay guy and everything. And obviously he was kind of born and raised in Wisconsin.
Yeah, it definitely comes up. God's a Green Bay guy, one of the best general managers, in the NFL, if not the best. I come in to work with a sponge every day. I've learned so much from him the last couple of years on how to build a roster, how to identify talent, and how to be a phenomenal leader. I've been lucky to be around some great leaders in my career, and John's another one of them, a great Wisconsin guy.
Paul Chryst, a Wisconsin guy, and I think this kind of was how Barry would describe his players, and honestly Badger players in general were, and you talk to people in the NFL, tough, smart, dependable is what Paul Chryst wanted out of players. That was their reputation in the NFL. What do you think, and obviously it's only 2 years, but what do you think, there hasn't been a lot of Badgers coming into the NFL, but do the Badgers still kind of maintain that sort of lore with NFL groups when they kind of think about Badger football over the last few years? Is it still smart, tough, dependable?
I know that's definitely the standard for all the alumni there. I think when you look at one of the things that we had in Wisconsin, even when we were recruiting during my time there, is our ability to develop players. Look at all the walk-ons, that we have had that have grown into great NFL players. Look at all the guys that were probably underdrafted that are doing extremely well in the NFL right now, if not drafted at all. So I think what we were able to do was be a development program. I think with the state of where we are right now, we have some young guys, and you look at the recruiting, and you look at the high numbers of recruiting, which I think is phenomenal for our program. But it's similar to drafting. It doesn't matter where you drafted a guy, where you recruited a guy, or how many stars the player had. How do you develop them, and how does he help your football team at the end of the day? So the development is something I think that we need to continue to hang our hat on. In Madison, and I think that's something we took a lot of pride in when we were there in Wisconsin as well.
It is funny, I think, and we're talking with Lamar Campbell, former Badger. I think every former Badger I talk to, whether it's Joe Thomas or Brad Nortman or Melvin Gordon or you, it's all about the development and growing these players, and it's something that they want Wisconsin to get back to. And I think that's kind of the sweet spot Wisconsin can live in here. Before I want to get to maybe some, what you'd like to see out of a new offensive coordinator, but I think to kind of give a good look, and I know you shared this story with me before about what Badger football was under Coach Alvarez and what they've kind of maintained over time. Talk about your recruitment with Coach Alvarez and why he stood out to you, because it's a very similar story that Ron Dane has told and other players have told, and it is one that I think stands out in a personal touch that I think that will always resonate.
Yeah, so I played 1 year of high school football my senior year, and we happened to be playing against the number one offensive lineman in the country, which was Floyd Winterburn. Ended up going to Penn State, ironically drafted here in Seattle. And everybody came there to see Floyd Winterburn. And I had a monster game that game. I think I had 2 touchdowns, maybe 2 interceptions, a lot of tackles. And after that week, my phone started ringing. Joe Paterno gave me a call. My mom hung up on him because she didn't know I could play. Nobody knew I could play. And I had been bussed out to a different school district for my senior year. So from the inner city, I was in a suburban school district. And Jim Huber, who was the offensive line coach at the time, was my direct recruiter. He would come and meet me. He would come out to the school. But when the final days of recruitment came, the only person that came to my neighborhood, was a really bad neighborhood, a lot of crime, a lot of drugs, was Barry Alvarez. So Barry said he's coming to my house, and Barry pulls up to the corner, and all the drug dealers are outside, all the bad guys are outside. And they're like, oh, they thinking Barry wants something besides football, right? He's like, nah, I'm here for soup. Oh, what school are you with? Wisconsin. And they kind of walked Barry up to the door, and they had the helicopter out looking for someone. And Barry comes in. He goes, oh, they weren't looking for you, were they, Sue? I was in, bro. Like, I shut down all my recruitment after that visit and decided to become a Badger, So for me, and think about it, you had on that visit, you had Bill Callahan, you had Brad Childers, staff members that would eventually go to the NFL. Brad actually is retired but became a head coach in the NFL, and Bill Callahan still turning out great offensive linemen down there in Tennessee. So when I talk about the staff, or how you develop your people and the staff you have, or how you develop your players, I think that's huge. But I think it speaks to the relationship of what it means to have a coach and a player dynamic. In the world of NIL and the world of development, if you cannot connect with your player, they will not perform at you at the highest level. You have to know who the player is. You have to know who the man is, and everything will take care of itself after that. I truly believe that.
Talking with former Badger Lamar Campbell on the jump around. With that, Wisconsin, you touched on earlier, would probably become even more important than it's ever been, because you think of like Hunter Wohler and Jack Nelson, 2 Wisconsin kids who probably could have been poached if they wanted to. Right. I'm sure they had offers. They stayed. Wisconsin means something to them. And I know Chris Soares talked about how, like, hey, he's from Texas and Wisconsin means as much to him as anyone else. And I do believe him when he says that. And I'm sure Wisconsin does as well. But that took time to build, as opposed, year 1, 2, 3, as you're part of that program, the roots get stronger, the pride gets stronger. Right. When you have someone who's born and raised in Wisconsin, it can help make sure that they're not getting picked off for an extra $25,000, that they will stay, and I think that part you mentioned earlier, in-state recruiting is going to even matter more, I think, in this NIL era.
Yeah, absolutely. One of my favorite things to do when I was on campus is I was afforded the opportunity to get in front of recruits and be able to speak to them about what it means to be a Wisconsin Badger. I consider myself a son of the university. Everything that I believe I achieved outside of my family's help was really springboarded by the University of Wisconsin. whether it was from the football staff. And let me get a shout out to the School of Education on Bascom Hill, whether it was the academics, they set me on a path to be successful and have an opportunity to do different things. And at the time, we would be honest with ourselves that Wisconsin wasn't for everybody. You were going to work for it. You were going to be an underdog. You were going to have to get up at 5:30 a.m. with John Detman and run the stadium stairs. You're going to have to do things differently. You were going to have to move differently. And our program wasn't for everyone. And we were honest with everyone coming in the door. But when those guys came into the program, we bought into something larger than ourselves. And when you buy into something larger than yourself, which is something I continue to look for now as a scout, will this guy buy into something larger than himself? If you're a starter on a college, but I need you on 4 special teams, will you be the same player that you were for me on those 4 special teams? And I think that's what we had at Wisconsin, guys that bought into something that was larger than themselves. And I think that's why you've seen the success we've had over the last 30 years.
Jim Rutledge here. It is the Jump Around 3.0, and I'm thrilled to be joined by Anthony Davis, who at most schools would be considered a top 5 running back, possibly in school history. At the University of Wisconsin, Anthony, unfortunately, the top 5 might be a top 5 list of the greatest running backs in all of college football history. So it is a tough list to crack here. But you had a heck of a career at the University of Wisconsin. I want to catch up with what you're up to now, but I do want to talk about your time here at Wisconsin at 01 through 04. Time frame here, multiple 1,000-yard seasons, kind of like do-all backs. You obviously had some ability to catch the ball in the backfield, made it to the NFL. As you look back at your time at Wisconsin, what are some of your favorite memories of being a Badger?
I would just say really the locker room. Had a great group of guys, great coaches, great support staff. So really just kind of a family environment, and just missing obviously missing that. You don't get that back once you're done playing. So it's definitely one that I miss from time to time. Traveling on the road, playing in some great stadiums out in Oregon, out at Ohio State, Penn State. The Big House, all those great type of venues. Just playing in some historic games, rivalry games. To me, the Big Ten was kind of like backyard football. A lot of the teams were right on top of each other, and really had some long-standing disdain for each other. So I really enjoyed that. Enjoyed the playing in the Big Ten. So.
And obviously, right now you're in higher education. You're also someone who's been on the player side of things, as far as someone who probably had ups and downs. Obviously, Big Ten Freshman of the Year was a heck of an up, but there could have been times, that other teammates of yours or yours, it could have been easier to transfer. And the portal making that so much easier in college football right now, tied in with name and likeness. And I do think those two get conflated a little bit, because at this point, it's not name and likeness, it's pay for play, really, from the universities. Because name and likeness would be, we pay someone to endorse their brand. And in this case, it's more of, we're just paying you to come here. So wearing both hats here as a former athlete and someone who's involved with just younger people and students, what do you think the impact of NIL and the portal is having on college football and the college education system in general?
Yeah, I definitely think it's going to have a tremendous impact on multiple levels, right? Like, I think that, for one, student athletes are not going to have the patience to stay somewhere and grow and develop. They may miss on big opportunities there. I think that it's going to impact the NFL draft tremendously, right? Because with the NIL and transfer portal combined, you have something similar to the NFL draft, a free agency, whatever you want to call it. Whereas, an athlete has a good season and they have the option. Okay, maybe I'm not eligible for the draft, but I can put my name in the portal, get an NIL evaluation, and see, what I may be able to earn through NIL. And next thing you know, they're in the portal off to their second or third school. And so I think from a fan's perspective, it's definitely frustrating. Even from an alumni perspective, it's frustrating in that, you don't always feel a sense of connection. Guys kind of shift in and out. Guys shift in and out so frequently that you don't get a chance to really follow some of the kids and watch them kind of grow and develop, the way you used to. So from that perspective, it's a little frustrating. From the player's perspective, I think it's a great opportunity for kids to who may not have the earning potential or the chance to earn a six-figure payout in the NFL, and this is their NFL draft, right? So you're giving someone an opportunity to potentially make good decisions and earn some life-altering money. And that's a hell of a head start in life if you get a payoff that allows you to buy a decent car, to put down on a house, to buy some property, to invest money. All these things that we just didn't necessarily have access to unless you made it to that level and got selected in a decent slot. So from that vantage point, I think if used responsibly, it's a great opportunity for some of these young men. I think combining it with the transfer portal and the two working together is a little messy right now, and I think the NCAA needs to do something to clean it up a little bit. I mean, you got a whole team that's not playing in a bowl game because their whole team left, and so I'm like, there needs to be some more regulation about how when the portal opens up and how it opens up and all that stuff to clean some things up.
I think you're talking about Marshall University, I believe that. Yeah. Yes. And I think that happened last year too. And I think cleanup is the right word here because I think it's very important. And I think it's great that the athletes are getting paid and they have agency over where they're going to be. I think something as similar as like just as simple as you mentioned, the NFL draft or things like that, contracts and, I don't know, just something where you have not movement restriction, but if you sign a contract and you make a commitment, and then if you play out that contract and you want to go somewhere else, great. But that way both sides, and the salary cap would be the other part of it to make sure these schools aren't able to blow everyone else out of the water. But the other thing that is incredibly important, I used to kind of scoff at like, oh, well, they're getting an education and, like that doesn't work for, Melvin Gordon, who like, I'm glad he got the college degree, but also the university or people made millions of dollars off him. He should have an opportunity to make some money off that as well. But now I worry that some parts with the portal of trying to find that perfect opportunity on the football side of things, I do worry sometimes that the education part of it could slip through the cracks because there's been a long list of Badgers who have been able to use that ability to have that college degree to jumpstart a change in their lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, what the beautiful thing about college sports is it gives a lot of people access to an education. Whether you come from an inner city or somewhere very rural, doesn't matter, right? Like if your family did not have the means to send you to college and you're able to earn a scholarship, that is invaluable in terms of upward mobility, in terms of putting you on a path to be successful in life. And so I do value that a lot. I do worry that, with this portal opening and you got guys moving from school to school to school. It's hard to track sometimes. I was watching, I follow one of the Instagram accounts, maybe Transfer Portal or something like that. Yeah. And one guy he was on like his fifth school or fourth school. And I'm like, golly, how are you getting any progress towards a degree when you're bouncing around so much? And so I do think that there needs to be some regulation to ensure that student athletes can still start to progress towards some type of degree. And also there's guys stuck in the portal. I think I read something that said that there were about 30% of guys that go in the portal and they never come out. And so I think I'm glad that they didn't have that when I played. I actually wanted to transfer after my first year. I was 7th string on the depth chart. Never thought I was going to see the field, and I wanted to go into the military or go run track somewhere. And my family basically said, no, you're going to stick by this decision and you're going to own your decisions and stick by them. And things ended up working out. But, currently I'm not sure if that happens. You know what I mean? So I'm not sure if those conversations are happening.
Well, relying on everyone having a strong family or support system to guide them in the right way is not the way to set this system up. The degree can open up a lot of doors for a lot of people. Mm-hmm. And yes, to your point, that if you're transferring everywhere, just from the simple idea of moving those credits around, how do those ever apply towards a degree? And so hopefully because the numbers haven't changed. And like only a slight few are going to make it to the NFL at all. And only a smaller group of that are going to have any success in the NFL. And I love, and I'm not faulting these kids for getting this money and having the opportunity to be like, all right, I can somehow get a college degree, but I also can get $50,000. I don't fault that. but then it's on everyone else in the system to set it up so players aren't discarded. I think of like the NFL or the NBA draft where they got rid of the high school to college because too many of these kids were trying to go right from high school to the NBA, trying to go from high school to the NBA. They weren't drafted. The NCAA said, well, you had an agent, so now you can't come play here. So these talented kids have no opportunity to get an education to play basketball, nor can they go to the NBA, and then they're just left out in the cold. And I worry that's going to happen too much in football too now.
Yeah, agreed. I think there will be a lot of casualties of war with this current system if we don't, if something isn't done to regulate some of this a little better. So, yeah, I mean, and for me, like I said, from a fan's perspective, it's extremely weird to see guys moving back and forth between even rival schools.
Yes.
Right? Like, there's some teams I would never play for. Like, I wouldn't even touch anything close to their uniforms. And I see, guys moving back and forth between rival schools is very weird to me. But again, this is a new thing.
What's number one school you wouldn't play for?
Probably Iowa. I would not play for Iowa. Minnesota. Wouldn't touch Minnesota or Iowa. Those two, no.
Well, and that's
Absolutely.
funny. I think Melvin Gordon had maybe verbally committed there, and then he ended up at Wisconsin, and then Tretchka Kahuna, who had decommitted, entered the portal, or however you want to word that, and then at least insinuated he had an offer from Minnesota, or maybe he did, and then he came back to Wisconsin. So that was one of those things where a Badger, but I don't know what that ties to Wisconsin anymore, and I don't fault Tretch for it, but a Badger was considering being a Gopher, which seems blasphemous.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it does. I mean, to me, things are different. I see a lot of guys moving around, even in SEC West, which used to be all the teams were fierce rivals. Florida and Georgia. I'm like, okay, how's this working out? So I think it's definitely a different game. It's a different game, and sometimes I just have to humble myself and recognize that I played in a different era. And I'm a fan, and from a fan's perspective, I don't like it sometimes, right?
Yeah.
I just don't like it. Makes it harder to connect to guys, to feel connected to some of the guys, to follow people, to watch them grow. You don't really see that because guys are here, then they're gone. Then there's new guys. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I watched the Badgers this season. I'm like, who is that? Where do we get this guy from? But it was a late transfer portal ad that I didn't see. So.
It has, and we appreciate your time. I got one more question for you because we've had a lot of former Badgers on to talk, and a lot of them have been running backs. James White, Montee Ball. We've had plenty on. We asked Barry Alvarez this question as well. We removed Ron Dane from the equation for Barry, but I'll ask you the same question. Who's your pick for the greatest Badgers running back in program history?
You know what, man? I'm a JT guy.
Okay.
I love Ron, and Ron was amazing. He had feet like he was one of the most nimble guys I've seen in terms of watching his actual film. But JT, the speed of JT was, the speed and the power, the tackle breaking ability. This guy was special. So between Ron and JT is one of those two, but I like JT a lot, man. And both of those guys are Jersey guys. So
I was just going to say no Jersey bias there? Or yeah.
I'm a big Jersey bias, but definitely I'm a big JT fan, big Ron fan, and those are the guys that, to me were different level,
Yeah, I think the Badgers might have to start looking around New Jersey again to find another running back. I do like some of the young guys they have, but it has been a successful area for Badgers in general, but especially the running backs.
Yeah, I don't know why we stopped. I don't know. Hopefully, we're still recruiting over there. So that's all I'll say.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for taking the time and sharing your perspective on the portal and everything else and Badger football. We're all fans, so thanks for hopping on.
Yep, no problem. Thank you.
All right, that's Anthony Davis. This has been the Jump Around 3.0.